Born in the United States to an American Jewish mother and an Iraqi Muslim father, she lived in Iraq as a child, returning to the U.S. at age 5. After graduating from Swarthmore College with a BA in Greek biology in 1993, she earned her medical degree from the University of Pennsylvania in 1997. Dr. Wasfi has made 2 trips to Iraq to visit her extended family since the 2003 shock and awe invasion, including a 3-month stay in Basra in the spring of 2006. She has brought her eyewitness account of life under occupation to 21 United States, Capitol Hill in D.C., Madrid, Spain in 2007, and the 3rd International Iraq Conference in Berlin, Germany in March 2008. Based on her experiences, Dr. Wasfi is speaking out in support of immediate, unconditional withdrawal of American forces from Iraq and the need to end the occupation from the Nile to the Euphrates. Her website is, you might want to make a note of this, www.liberatethis.com. Dahlia, thank you.
What I'm going to talk to you about is women and children first, the first targets of U.S. foreign policy, and just basically to really put into human terms what you've already heard about, because when it comes down to it, it's the graphic humanity that we need to understand, and understand why Iraqis are fighting so hard to get us out. I show the images of occupation. Basically what I do is I'm going door to door doing what the mainstream media did in Vietnam to show the reality of war, because the Iraqi people don't get an edited version, the Iraqi children don't get an edited version, and American soldiers don't get an edited version, which is why an average of 15 soldiers and Marines are attempting suicide every day. Let me tell you about me. These are my parents. My dad from Basra, Iraq, Iraq's 2nd largest city. It's in the south, near the border with Kuwait. He was born and raised there and graduated from secondary school and did well enough, or then moved on. Didn't have to do well enough, it's free education. So he went to Baghdad University, College of Sciences, and did well enough there to earn a government scholarship to do his graduate studies overseas. So he ended up coming to the United States, was studying at Georgetown University and living in D.C., where he happened to meet another graduate student, a nice Jewish girl from New York. Now, with an Arab father and Jewish mother, although those groups are not mutually exclusive, there are many Arab Jews, but with an Arab father and an Ashkenazi Jewish mother, I am 100% Semite. So you could insult either side of my family, and that would be anti-Semitic, but let's wait for the Q&A. And then the other point is that with an Arab father and Jewish mother, I'm going to be in therapy for a long, long time. Okay, moving on. My parents got married in 1968, had my sister in 1969, and then their lives dramatically improved in 1971 when I came along. Now there might be, thank you, there might be difference of opinion on an exit strategy from Iraq, but I think we can all agree I was a very cute baby. Now, I make that point because we can't all get along. We're in unison here. Let's build on that unity. Now, I show this picture not only for the gratuitous applause, though I appreciate it, but this is, thank you. This is me 6 months old, and this is in our backyard in Iraq. After my dad finished his PhD, he had to pay back that government scholarship by teaching at Basra University for 5 years. So he finished in August 71. I was born in December 71. The first 5 years of my life were back and forth between Iraq and New York, or the States. And when you're a kid, you think everybody does that. But anyway, the memories I have of Iraq look like this. For any of us, the memories of our childhood before the time that our brain could make memories are from the pictures. So you talk to me about Iraq, and I think of this. But unfortunately, most people don't think of this. They think of this. And therein lies the problem. You pick any country on the face of our planet, and it is made up of families. And it is those families who pay the price for the actions of their leadership. Sometimes they reap the benefits. These days, most often, they're paying the price. Whether it's the over 4,500 families who've lost their loved ones in a war based on lies in Iraq and Afghanistan, Whether it's the people of New Orleans, who close to 3 years now after Hurricane Katrina hit, have yet to be able to return home. Whether it's the people in Minneapolis who fell to their deaths because while we send billions and give billions to American corporations and mercenary companies, the infrastructure in this country is falling apart. Or whether you're talking about the 26 million, the families who make up Iraq, who are paying the ultimate price in our continued occupation. Now this is an Iraqi family. That's my dad, my sister on the right, and me. And this is an American family. There's my dad, my sister on the right, and me. See, we all look alike. I was born in New York. I was born in Manhattan, though I'm scared of New York today. My sister was born in D.C., and my dad became a citizen in the 1980s. So when you talk to me about shock and awe of Iraq, you might as well tell me that you're going to shock and awe Yonkers, New York, because it's the same thing to me. These were my grandparents, Ashkenazi Jews who fled their homeland of Austria during Hitler's Anschluss. They came to New York, they came to Yonkers and settled down and were able to start a new life. Unfortunately, now I have genocide on both sides of my family, so it's for both sides of my family and my new family today, the people I've met on this journey. It's for all of them that I do what I do, and all of you who have made the time to come out here today, and I appreciate that. This is my father. This is the standard graduation photo that you will find in 99% of the homes in Iraq. The same thing today. I've seen it in my cousins on the wall. And this is when he graduated in 1961 from the College of Sciences. I just found this photo at my uncle's house in 2006, and I brought it home to my dad, and he said, "Look at how handsome I am." I said, "Yes, and you're very humble too." So now you know where I got it from. Anyway, now when he graduated, this is graduation day, and there you see my father in the middle there. And I just want to point out, oh my goodness, I see arms, bare arms on the women. 1961 in Iraq. Only she has her hair covered, but you see the women are dressed pretty Western appearance. I'll show you, when I came back in 2004, this is how we left the house. We deposed a secular government and have ushered in theocratic rule. So this is the reality for women in Iraq, especially in the south where the most of my family is. This is because if we're arguing that the Americans need to stay to prevent Iran from taking over, that's a done deal. The Iranian militias for the conservative parties, of whom Nouri al-Maliki and Ibrahim Jafari before him are a member, they have come in to lay claim to Najaf and Karbala, which are the holiest Shia cities. So that's a done deal. Now, international law it should be before that, but specifically UN Security Council Resolution 1325 recognizes the suffering of women and children back in October of 2000 and calls upon all parties to armed conflict to respect fully international law applicable to the rights and protection of women and girls, especially as civilians, in particular the obligations applicable to them under the Geneva Conventions of 1949. The Geneva Conventions, a little something that was passed by the international community to try to make sure that what happened to civilians in World War II would happen never again. In addition to that, in 1989, Conventions on the Rights of the Child was approved, and we are party to and responsible to obey and enforce these laws. But in reality, on the ground in Iraq, Iraqi women and children are paying the highest price. Before shock and awe, in March of 2003, we had destroyed the healthcare system, we had used depleted uranium, and the impact of economic sanctions had punished women and children. After March of 2003, those three elements were still at play, but on top of it, they lost security. There's a refugee crisis, and that ushered in prostitution, drugs, and HIV. And so these are the images I hope you will remember. When we see Arabs or Muslims in the media, it's typically young military-aged male. They're angry, they're dressed in black, they have their faces covered to hide their identity, they're chanting in a language we don't understand, and they're carrying weapons. So that it's a confusion over the population. Now, do the math with me. Any country, about half male, half female. Out of the women, the girls, and the boys, the majority of any country is women and children. So when we don't see images of Arab women and children or Muslim women and children, it's a subliminal message that there's something different about them. They are separate from us. They don't respect life the way we do. But in reality, women and children are paying the highest price. Oh, there's two more cuties. I won't even recognize the little one today. She should be now 2 years old, and her older sister 4 years old. This is from 2006. So the public health infrastructure incapacitated by the Gulf War, once known as the jewel of the Arab world, identified as a first-class range of medical facilities, was knocked out of commission by the first Gulf War, where we targeted electrical power plants, electrical grids and water sewage treatment plants. As a result, there was massive disease outbreak and limited capacity to treat it, and primary health care services ceased to exist. 3 major causes of morbidity and mortality for children under 5, lower respiratory infections, diarrhea, and measles and other vaccine-preventable diseases. All conditions that are easily treatable if you have the materials and you have the personnel. But we blocked that. And to this day, respiratory infections and diarrhea account for 70% of the deaths of children under 5. What would we do if another country's policy made sure, or was causing, that 70% of the deaths of children under 5? We have a problem with it. Depleted uranium, just briefly, DU is radioactive waste that the Pentagon found a use for. If you formulate it into rods and hit a tank with it, it cuts through that tank like a hot knife through butter, which is very exciting if you're the Pentagon. But on impact, depleted uranium bursts into flames and goes into tiny microscopic particles, like spraying a spray can, and then you can't see it. It goes to the air and the sand and the water supply for the people. It's tons of microscopic radioactive contamination, and when the Pentagon sent their #1 guy to investigate it, Doug Rockey, he came back and said, don't ever use this again. You shouldn't have used it in the first place because it lingers for years. Just 4.5 billion, but who's counting? And you need to inform the civilian population of what you've done here, and you need to inform returning veterans. And every returning veteran needs to be tested for exposure, because if they have problems arising from that exposure, they're entitled to benefits. Well, the test itself for DU exposure, the blood test, is $1,000 a shot. Cheney wasn't about to spend that kind of money, and certainly not pay out benefits to all those veterans who were suffering complications. 1/3 of returning veterans, which is now somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million soldiers of Operation Enduring Freedom, 1/3 are presenting to the VA with medical complaints, and the VA cannot handle it. And they certainly aren't going to be willing to pay out benefits to all of these individuals. And the Pentagon said, Doug, thank you so much, you're fired. On the other side, in Iraq, after the first Gulf War, there was a 600% increase in Iraq's infant mortality rate and 300% increase in the incidence of pediatric leukemias and lymphomas. Cancers that, because we blocked chemotherapeutic agents from entering Iraq for the argument they could be used to manufacture chemical weapons, 100% fatality for these children. Economic sanctions, as many of you know, imposed on August 6, 1990, blocking Iraq from selling oil, which was 95% of their economy. It also blocked the import of goods, and this affected, this limited reconstruction of the infrastructure that was damaged during the first Gulf War. By 1995, UNICEF was reporting that economic sanctions were yielding a minimum of political dividends against a high human price paid primarily by women and children. The food rationing system that had begun after the imposition of sanctions was providing less than 60% of the required daily caloric intake, and the water sanitation systems were still destroyed, and shortages of life-saving drugs were there. This brought in the Oil for Food program, which we know was rife with corruption because Saddam Hussein was selling oil on the black market, and he was getting fat during sanctions while the people suffered. Who was he selling oil to? Halliburton, CEO Dick Cheney. By 1997, nearly 1 million children in southern and central Iraq are chronically malnourished. This is an increase of 72% since 1991. There was no poverty in Iraq prior to the imposition of economic sanctions. What the UNICEF rep in Baghdad said was that it is clear that children are bearing the brunt of the current economic hardship. This is what you saw in Iraq. Anywhere from 2 to 5 babies in one incubator. Number 1, they fit. Number 2, if an incubator breaks, Sanctions prevented a new one from coming in or replacement parts for an old one. Number 3, because the electrical grids were damaged for the rolling blackouts, it requires less gas to run one generator than 2. There's your malnutrition, and this is where most of the children ended up. This is Children's Cemetery in Baghdad. And just want to point out that this is February 11, 2003, and now here we come to shock and awe. So March 19, 2003 to the present. This is the reality of war. This is what children are growing up in today. No access to healthcare anymore. No access to education anymore. This is shock and awe, and mission accomplished, because you see this little one should have a breathing tube in their mouth to protect the airway because of the proximity of the burns to the oral cavity. And also, there's lacking that equipment, lacking that personnel, and also, as you can see, lacking pain medication. This is what war and occupation look like. So as we saber rattle towards Iran and Syria and North Korea and every other country that dares to threaten the value of the dollar, this is the image we should have in mind. Shall we do this to their children? Now, the majority of this is actually childbirth, so hopefully the guys will be all right with the picture. But this was an emergency cesarean section, and there's the placenta. This was an emergency because the mother was shot in the abdomen. And if you watch the movie The Ground Truth, interviews with veterans of Operation Enduring Freedom, you will hear them talk about shooting at pregnant women. It happens quite frequently at checkpoints because obviously people are speeding to get to the hospital. But what you see here, the mother was shot in the abdomen. Now, depleted uranium damaged a lot of fetuses, but you see this one was a healthy fetus, a healthy child, now born, with hopefully 10 fingers, 10 toes, 1 entrance wound, and 1 exit wound. Happy birthday from the United States of America. This is the reality on the ground. They don't hate our freedoms. They hate us because our policies are killing their families. So after March 2003, with increased patients, increased death and destruction, there is no law and order, a refugee crisis beyond proportion, and prostitution. Health indicators in Iraq today, 68% of Iraqis have no access to safe drinking water. 19% of Iraqis have sewerage access. The majority of the country experiences sewage in the streets, which is a public health problem. It would be problematic here in New York. Diarrheal disease continues to this day. Cholera is endemic in Iraq. It is due to the destruction of the electricity and sewage treatment plants and overcrowded conditions. So with mass refugees, 2.5 million outside the country, 2.5 million inside the country, everything is escalated. 70% of child deaths today caused by easily treatable conditions. Since the invasion in 2003 through the period, the 3-year period till October 2006, 270,000 children born and received no immunizations. Depleted uranium. The first Gulf War, we used over 300 tons. Today, we've now used over 2,000 tons. We are now seeing evidence of increased cancer cases in Baghdad since March 2003, whereas before they were concentrated where we used depleted uranium in Basra. There is no security after invasion. Women and children, anywhere around the world where there is no law and order, women and children are the most susceptible to violence. They're susceptible to violence and kidnapping. And in the Lancet report, the #1 cause of death for children and women the aerial bombing raids were the most significant cause for civilian morbidity and mortality because pilots 2 miles in the air can't see who's sitting in those houses. And usually when you hear insurgent safe house or insurgent stronghold, that's a neighborhood. People live there. And women and children are hiding in their homes to stay out of the violence we've brought to their streets. In Iraq, May 2007, the State of the World's Mothers report said that in Iraq, the chance that a child will live beyond age 5 has plummeted faster than anywhere else in the world since 1990, since about the time that we showed up. Prostitution, HIV, and drugs. Today, over 1 million are widowed and orphaned. 50,000 Iraqi refugees forced into prostitution. Many of them have no other means of earning a living. If their husband husbands have been killed, they go to Syria and Jordan. They can't get work permits officially because Syria and Jordan are protecting their own population's economy. So they have to resort to prostitution. This was unheard of before we were involved. And now, if you cannot work legally, survival sex is the method that they resort to, and that's an article in MSNBC. Once again, UN Security Council resolution calls on all parties to armed conflict to take special measures to protect women and girls from gender-based violence, particularly rape and other forms of sexual abuse. In the U.S. military today, 30% of women report rape, 90% report sexual harassment. So if that's what American military women face from their brothers in arms, then we can't expect much better for Iraqi people. Victimizing women and children victimizes society in general and victimizes peace and stability. So we should be acting to support women and children here at home and overseas. The Iraqi people want us out. The majority want us out. And maybe you don't believe polls, just follow the number of American dead. That's the only, they know that's the only number we pay attention to. And that will not stop rising until the troops come home. Our obligation to the people of Iraq, to the people of America, and to the rest of the world is the immediate, unconditional withdrawal of foreign military forces from Iraq, period. I know we get discouraged, but what we face here is nothing compared to what the Iraqi people are facing for survival every day. We have electricity, we have water, whatever it is your heart tells you to do, follow your heart and never ever give up, because if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? Thank you all so much for your attention.